Now, the Black Sea grain deal is on the brink of expiration. The question is, will Russia pull out or allow for an extension? For more on this, let's just go across to Shiva.
Thanks, Aim. I'll take it from here. Now, of course, we are talking about the grain deal, and the entire world is watching because it really does affect the entire world globally. If this grain deal is not renewed, it is set to expire within hours from now, and Russia is yet to renew the deal under which Moscow allowed Ukraine to ship its grain across the Black Sea. Now, the deal was brokered by the United Nations and Turkiye. It was signed by Moscow and Kyiv, and it happened in July last year. It's set to expire today, in a few hours. Now, crucially, the pact established a protected sea corridor allowing Ukraine's agricultural goods to reach global markets. Now, here's what happens if the deal is not extended. Let's take that scenario first. The basics. Let's start with that. Ukraine is a major producer of grains and oilseeds. The interruption to its exports at the outbreak of war pushed global food prices to record highs. It was impacting a lot of nations which were depending on these food grains coming in from Ukraine. Now, the current deal, agreed some 5 months after the war started, helped to bring down prices and ease a global food crisis. Now, Ukraine's grain has also played a direct role with over 725,000 tons or 2.2% of the supplies shipped through the corridor, which is used by WION World Food Program. Now, countries such as Ethiopia, Somalia and Yemen, they all depend on this grain which comes from Ukraine. So they will be badly affected if it is not renewed. The big question now, what happens if the deal ends? What happens if Russia doesn't go ahead with it? Now, prices for some staple foods would likely rise, but the situation is better than in the months that followed after the war started last year in 2022. Now, grain supplies have improved from other producers such as Russia and Brazil. Now, as per last week's data, wheat prices, the main ingredient in bread, have fallen about 17% so far this year, while corn is down 26%. The current global food crisis, however, is far from over. The World Food Program said last month that multiple emergencies had overlapped, creating largest and most complex hunger and humanitarian crisis in over 70 years. So it is definitely a major problem, and it is unprecedented. In 2022, a record 349 million people, they experienced acute hunger, and 772,000 teetered on the edge of famine. So you can imagine the kind of impact it has had on a global scale. Next, I want to talk to you about the state of global food supplies. Global corn stocks began the 2021-22 season at a 6-year low. Russia's invasion of Ukraine, one of the world's top corn exporters, led to a significant jump in prices. A sharp increase in exports from Brazil have helped boost supplies, along with the export of nearly 17 million tons of corn through the corridor. The US Department of Agriculture has forecast global corn stocks by the end of 2023-24 season, which will be at a 5-year high. Now, according to US data, global wheat, we're talking about global wheat stocks, which are tighter and were at a 7-year low at the end of the 2022-23 season. But looking forward, a slight increase is forecast for 2023-24. Now, let's come to it. If the deal ends, can the corridor operate without Russia? Let's take a look at this scenario next. Ukraine's ports were blocked until the agreement was reached in July last year. So as a result of that, Ukraine was not able to export. It is unclear whether it would be possible to ship grain if Russia withdrew from this deal. Now, it's not clear whether they'll be able to continue or not. Additional war risk insurance premiums, which are charged when entering the Black Sea area, would go up as well. It is a charge which will definitely increase. Ship owners could prove reluctant to allow their vessels to enter a war zone without Russia's agreement. It will definitely create a lot of insecurity amongst others. War risk insurance policies need to be renewed every 7 days. Every 7 days. And it costs thousands of dollars. All right, for more on this, we have Dr. Malcolm Davis, Senior Analyst in Defence Strategy and Capability at Australian Strategic Policy Institute, who's joining us live from Canberra. Welcome to the broadcast, sir.
Thank you very much.
Right. So the deal expires in a few hours, or maybe a little more than that. But the point is, Russia has still not given a verdict. What's going through the mind of Putin? What is Russia up to? Are they hoping to use this as leverage to barter some kind of sanctions relaxations now that the ball is in their court for at least some time?
I think probably yes. I think that Putin knows that if he essentially pulls out of the grain deal and then reinstitutes the blockade of Ukraine's ports, that would create a huge global crisis that would actually undermine a key part of his support base in the global south, where a lot of this grain is going to provide food for large numbers of people. If that grain is not shipped, and you have suddenly a massive food crisis with starvation occurring in developing countries, a lot of his support breaks away. So I think probably the most likely scenario is that he will agree to keep the grain deal going at the last moment, but he's holding out for some sort of sign of concession from the West.
Right, sir, absolutely. Now we saw Ukraine, it's a big exporter of food grains. So when Russia did invade Ukraine, it of course compromised these exports as well. Now the question is, what would be the global impact on food security if Russia does not renew this deal?
Well, if it is a case that he doesn't renew the deal and then he imposes a blockade on Ukrainian ports, and basically no state is prepared to run that blockade for fear of a direct military clash with Russian forces, and I'm thinking here about Turkey, for example, then you would see over time food supplies, grain supplies dry up to the point whereby you then start to see food shortages in places such as Africa and the Middle East and elsewhere. And you then start to see starvation occurring. And I think at that point, the international community would have to step in and basically force the blockade, basically send in naval forces into the Black Sea to challenge the Russians directly. And that would be obviously an incredibly dangerous step, because it would bring about the possibility of a direct military clash between Russian forces and, for example, NATO forces.
So, next up, wanted to take this up. Now, Ukraine's markets have shifted dramatically from traditionally being centered in Asia and North Africa, which was before the war, to mainly Europe. And they've done this through the land route because of the problems that they were facing in the Black Sea. Now, it is a move which has also caused a lot of uproar in European farmers. So, question is, how much will it impact Ukraine if the deal is not extended?
Look, I think it would not impact Ukraine per se, in the sense that it's the Russians that would be not extending the deal, not the Ukrainians. So I think that what would happen in terms of Europe is that they would try to find other supply chains for grains and food supplies. But I think really it's not so much Europe that would be affected. It's North Africa, Central Africa, countries that rely on those grain supplies to go into Africa. Even though, as you say, they've shifted the focus to Europe, it's still an awful lot of people in Africa rely on those food supplies.
All right. Well, Dr. Malcolm, thank you so much for joining us on the show with your insights on this.
Thank you very much.